How's everybody doing this week? I'm Garrett Lash. This is D'Angelo Stevenson. This week we're going to preview the AFC for everybody. Now let's start off 1 p.m. on Sunday when the Cincinnati Bengals take their undefeated record into Buffalo and play the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals starting off really strong this year, 5-0. The Buffalo Bills, interesting discussion at the beginning of the season. They're 3-2, looking to pull off a big victory at home. How do you see this one going?
Well, when you look at the Bengals, they have one of the best passing attacks in the NFL with Andy Dalton and A.J. Green. Plus, that defense is no joke. Now, when you look at the Buffalo Bills, who are 3-2 this year, they're kind of a mediocre team. You know, Rex Ryan is kind of doing his thing, but they're kind of getting by with some wins. But I do have Cincinnati taking this game.
I have Cincinnati taking this game as well. I think the firepower of the Bengals offense is too strong for Tyrod Taylor and the Bills.
Exactly.
It's going to be tough for the Bills to keep up with the Bengals offense, and I'm going to take the Bengals here.
But let's not forget about Tyrod Taylor. He's still an explosive threat in the NFL this year.
All right, let's move on to another matchup where the Arizona Cardinals from the NFC take their 4-1 record into Heinz Field, where they play the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers obviously had a lot of hype going into this season, suffered a couple early losses, and they still don't have Ben Roethlisberger. Michael Vick's going to be back there. When you think about the Cardinals, they got a really, really strong defense. How do you see those two teams matching up?
The Arizona Cardinals is a defense to offense game. The defense plays so well that the momentum switches over to the offense, especially with a guy like Carson Palmer, who hasn't played this great since his days in Cincinnati. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, players are really stepping up in the absence of Ben Roethlisberger. So I think I'm going to have Arizona still take the win.
I think so, too. I think when you think about Michael Vick's play so far, last week, before his last two drives, he went 8 for 18 with 79 yards and no touchdowns and a pick. Didn't have too strong of a game. Was clutch at the end, but I just think that the really strong secondary of Arizona with people like Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu, they're going to shut him down this week. And I know that you got strong weapons like Le'Veon Bell in the backfield. I just don't think that they're going to have enough power to match up with Carson Palmer, whose receivers are really stepping up for him, like Larry Fitzgerald, having a real good bounce-back season. Carson Palmer threw for 3 touchdowns last week in a very efficient performance. So I'm going to have the Cardinals as well. All right, now we're on to the Sunday night game where the New England Patriots head into the Oil Drum and take on the Indianapolis Colts. The New England Patriots, another undefeated team like the Cincinnati Bengals from the AFC. Huge win in Dallas last week. Looked very impressive. The Colts at 3-2 sit atop the AFC South, but a few lackluster performances at the beginning of this season really makes their team a little suspect. So how do you feel like this matchup's going to play out?
When you look at the Colts' offense, maybe their game overall, they have really been playing a little lackluster, and you can't just do that against the New England Patriots and Tom Brady, who had a monster game against the Dallas Cowboys last week. And for me personally, this is a rivalry that's so personal to me. The media is hyping this up as a revenge game, but I'm going to have to go with the New England Patriots taking this game.
I'm with you. I just think that the Colts start off with 2 very poor performances. They did win 3 in a row. A little bit of momentum, but their 3 wins were against their 3 AFC South Division opponents, all of which have losing records. Andrew Luck looking a little bit shaky to start off the season. Obviously, you want him back there if you're Indianapolis, but not looking as strong as he has been in the past. Okay. I just think that Tom Brady, with his offensive weapons, are just going to dominate.
But also, big credit to Matt Hasselbeck. The old geezer just came back last week and just did his thing.
He is, I will say, he is stepping up nice for the Colts, getting some wins, and making sure hopefully they can make it to the playoffs at least this season. Pats are just too strong. I take the Pats in this one.
Exactly. Now that wraps up this week's AFC preview. We're going to send it over to Chandler and Carson for the NFC.
Thanks, guys. Week 6 in the NFC is going to be a very good week as well. In fact, our first game that we're going to talk about today is going to be the Chicago Bears heading to Detroit to play Carson's Lonely Lions. Carson, what do you see transpiring in this game?
Well, I actually, believe it or not, have the Bears winning. My Lions have looked pretty awful, to say the least. I have the Bears winning. They're at 2-3, and the Lions are currently winless, the only team in the NFL. And last week against the Cardinals, they had to bring in their backup quarterback because they turned the ball over 6 times. Yeah, Stafford had 3 interceptions. Golden Tate had a fumble. Amir Abdullah had a fumble. And then the backup quarterback also had an interception, so 6 turnovers. I don't see them playing well against the Bears, even though the Bears aren't much better. They are at home, which gives them a slight advantage. But, I mean, they're playing weak this year, and their coach, Jim Caldwell, there's been a lot of talk that he should be fired. Joe Lombardi is another one that a lot of people think should be fired. So we'll see. I just don't have the Lions winning. They're not giving me much hope this year. It's depressing.
Yeah, I understand. I totally understand where you're coming from. As far as Jim Caldwell is concerned, I personally feel like after that Seattle game, I mean, he has to get some looks at.
Yeah, they should have made a bigger deal about it. If it was any other team in the NFL, the Patriots, they would have made a huge deal about it. But the Lions just sat back and took it, so.
Yeah, they're the Lions, and I agree with you, Carson. I think the Bears are going to win this game. Jay Cutler, I dogged him at the beginning of the season, but he's actually been playing well this year. He has a 51.6 QBR rating. He's led the Bears to 2 consecutive wins. Not only that, the Bears defense is also playing very well this season. They're ranked 4th in the NFL, which is pretty shocking because they've been ranked dead last in various categories in previous years, but their defense is led by Kyle Fuller and guys like that, and they lost Antrell Roll this season, but, guys have been able to step up, and I think that defense is just going to give your Detroit Lions, a little bit of a tough game this week. Another big game this week, and probably one of the biggest games of the season so far, is going to be the Carolina Panthers traveling to Seattle to play the Seahawks. Carson, what do you see happening in this game?
Well, this game is a big game for the Panthers. If they win, I believe that they will show a lot of people, they had a lot of doubters, that they are a serious contender this year for the NFC Championship or maybe even the Super Bowl. When we made our predictions at the beginning of the year, none of us really considered the Panthers, but they're 4-0 right now. They're 2-0 on the road. And if they can beat Seattle, one of the better teams from last year, they're looking a little iffy this year. But if they beat them, I think people will finally start buying the hype with the Panthers, and possibly they'll win the NFC South.
Yeah, even though the Panthers do have Luke Kuechly coming back, even though they're 4-0 right now, I still am not giving up on my Super Bowl NFC pick.
Really?
The Seattle Seahawks. Yeah.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I just can't do it right now. Even though the Seahawks did give up, a 17-point lead last week in Cincinnati, but I still have them winning this game simply because they are home. They are in Seattle this week, and that's definitely going to be beneficial to them this week. Not only that, Carolina, they've lost 5 straight games against Seattle, and that's not a very good formula. I think the Seattle Seahawks, Legion of Boom, they're going to definitely make it tough for Cam Newton this week. I don't think Seattle's going to blow them out necessarily, but I do believe Seattle will end up pulling out the win. I hate doing this, Carson, but like they did against your Lions.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm not buying Seattle this year because the Lions almost beat them. If it wasn't for that call, you never know. I'm still salty about it. But, I mean, they also lost last week to the Bengals. So I'm giving the Panthers the credit they deserve. If they can beat Seattle, I think they're a serious contender.
Okay, fair enough. A big interconference game this week is going to be the San Diego Chargers traveling to Green Bay to play the Packers. Now, I personally believe that the Green Bay Packers will come out on top in this game simply because Aaron Rodgers is playing on an elite level right now. I mean, elite might not even be the word to use for Aaron Rodgers. The Packers, they're 5-0 right now. That defense looked a little suspect against the Rams last week against Todd Gurley, but I think ultimately simply because the San Diego Chargers don't really have a consistent running game, they'll be able to get it together this week. And like I said, Aaron Rodgers and James Jones, they're playing on all cylinders right now, and I just personally believe Phillip Rivers is not going to be enough for the San Diego Chargers to win this week.
I agree with you. I have Green Bay winning this game and going 6-0. They're playing really well right now. They're 3-0 at home, like always. And you said earlier that their defense didn't play that well last week, which I agree to some extent. They did have 4 interceptions against the Rams, so keep that in mind for this week. I agree that Phillip Rivers won't be able to do much against the Packers at Lambeau. You have to take that into effect as well. The home advantage will really help them. And Aaron Rodgers, he did have 2 interceptions last week. 2 touchdowns as well, though. So, and he's not known to throw interceptions at home. So I have Green Bay as well.
The last game of the week is the New York Giants traveling to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. Now, I personally believe the New York Giants are going to get the win in this game simply because they are riding high right now. They're on a 3-game winning streak. Eli Manning is coming off one of the best weeks of his career, throwing for a franchise record 441 yards, having 3 touchdowns. He had an interception, but thankfully it didn't hurt the Giants too much because we won the
It's
game.
always good news.
Yeah, that's always good news. And I think him and Odell Beckham Jr. will just ultimately have their way with the Philadelphia defense. Even though Philadelphia has made strides this season, DeMarco Murray is finally trying to get things going a little bit. Ryan Matthews has continued to be productive for them. But like I said, I just think Eli Manning and Odell Beckham Jr. and that the rest of that Giants offense is just going to be too much for the Philadelphia Eagles to handle on Monday night.
I agree with you, Chandler. I have the Giants beating the Eagles this week, and it's a huge NFC East game because, as you know, the Giants are atop of the division at 3-2, and all the other teams in the division are 2-3. So if the Giants do lose, they'll fall to 3-3 and be tied with the Eagles. So they have to play well this week. It is a huge game for them. Luckily for the Eagles, they've had a great run defense, but on the other hand, Eli Manning threw 3 touchdowns last week, only 1 interception. He's been throwing pretty well, so they do have that. He'll be forced to throw in this game because their run defense is so good. So it'll be interesting to see. I do have the Giants winning, and we'll just have to see how that goes. But hopefully, I'm hoping for you, man.
Yeah, thanks.
They've been on a roll, so.
Yeah. Thanks, Carson. I really appreciate it. Well, that wraps things up for the NFC. Now, for you fantasy experts and for you fantasy players out there, our boys Nick and Danny will kick things off in fantasy football this week for you.
Thank you, Chandler. This is Nick Marinesi with Danny Kelly, and we're here to give you fantasy updates for Week 6 of the NFL.
All right, let's start off with sleepers for this week. I like David Johnson for the Arizona Cardinals this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. David Johnson scored 2 touchdowns last week. He's been getting a lot more touches, splitting with Chris Johnson, but I think he's going to definitely see an increase in touches this week, and look for him to blow up on your fantasy team for Week 6.
My first sleeper pick goes to Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback Blake Bortles. He had a very good game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, and he's currently ranked 7th out of all NFL quarterbacks in fantasy points. He will also be taking on a very weak Houston Texans defense, so expect his points to be very high this week.
All right, my second fantasy pick for this week is Kendall Wright, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. I think he's going to do pretty well this week. He's got Marcus Mariota throwing the ball to him. He's been playing pretty well in recent weeks. They're playing the Miami Dolphins this week, who, let's face it, have been pretty atrocious on defense so far this season. Look for Kendall Wright to blow up this week.
My second sleeper pick goes to the Minnesota Vikings defense. The Vikings will be playing at home this week, and their first 2 home games were won in dominating fashion. They will also be playing a Kansas City Chiefs offense that will be without Jamal Charles for the rest of the season. And without a solid wide receiving core, it will be very difficult for the Chiefs offense to solve the Minnesota Vikings defense this week. Now we will go over the locks for this week. My first lock goes to a quarterback that isn't necessarily considered as an elite quarterback, but he has certainly played like one this year. That is New York Giants starting quarterback Eli Manning. He's only thrown 2 interceptions the entire season, and last week against the 49ers had a career night. He will be playing the Eagles defense, which is generally known as a heavy run-stopping defense. So while the Giants' running game may be stopped, Eli Manning will continue to make crisp throws and more touchdowns, and possibly no interceptions once again.
All right, our next lock this week is Matt Forte, running back for the Chicago Bears. The Bears are playing the Lions this week, who are 0-5, and their defense has not looked too great so far this season. I think Matt Forte is going to run all over them. I think he could run in for a touchdown or 2 and probably go over 100 yards of rushing. So he's definitely a good pick for your running back slot this week.
The Jacksonville Jaguars defense hasn't exactly been spot on this year, giving up 51 and 38 points in separate games. This should be good news for Houston Texans wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, as he is the star wide receiver for the Houston Texans, and he should be picking up big numbers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think DeAndre Hopkins is a solid pick for this week. He scores around 15 to 20 points every week, with the occasional touchdown or two. I think he's a definite lock this week. Definitely put him in your lineup. Now we're going to move into dislikes for the week. My first dislike is either Andrew Luck or Matt Hasselbeck, depending on who plays for the Colts this week, because Andrew Luck's still questionable. I just think that the Colts are going to get blown out in this game, and the Patriots defense looks pretty good, so don't pick either of them.
Cleveland Browns quarterback Josh McCown led everyone in the NFL in fantasy points last week with 35. Unfortunately, he has shown no consistency since taking over as the Cleveland Browns quarterback, so I'm not expecting him to have nearly as good of a performance this week.
That's all for NFL Preview this week. On behalf of Capital City Sports, I'm Danny Kelly.
And I'm Nick Veronesi.
And we'll see you next week.